Right. Hello there. My name is Tanya Hemmings. We're going to be going live shortly in the next 2 minutes. I've just signed on a bit early to enable everybody who's keen and interested to join to see that the stream is going live and that there are no disruptions. Let's hope that there are no technical glitches. This is a first for myself and my co-hosts. So we are excited and I can say a little bit nervous. And we're looking forward to welcoming you all to our live stream event here on Facebook Live this morning. So if you have already signed in, please let us know that you're there. We'd love to start seeing some comments just to know that people can see us and hear us. Great. So let me look. It's not yet live. It's not yet 11:30, so I'm going to wait a few more minutes before welcoming you all to the event and introducing you to my co-hosts. So we are doing this live from Port Elizabeth. It's a beautiful sunny day. Yay! We've got some comments already. So welcome. Glad to know that it's reaching some people already. I can see there are some people already online. So excellent. So welcome everybody. Glad to see that you're all here and are joining us for our 5-week series on self-care. We'll explain shortly why this is so important, and I think you all know that it is an important thing to be thinking of right now at this time. So even though it's really stressful, it's uncertain times, fearful times, we all need to practice self-care. Great. Thank you. And I've had some comments to say that they can hear us loud and clear. So awesome. So just a little breakdown. I will be co-hosting this event with my 2 lovely co-hosts, Marelise Lerm, a registered counsellor, and Jade, a counselling psychologist from the practice Listening Well in Newton Park, Port Elizabeth. We will be introducing you to the different topics that we're going to be speaking about today. And I'll just give you a brief rundown on what those are before I bring on my co-hosts. So today is just introduction, a question and answer series. So we'd love to hear some questions from you. And as the discussion proceeds, I will post some of those comments onto the screen, so you should see them live. And my co-hosts and I can do our best to answer those questions, even if it's a comment as to how you're feeling, because today is primarily about what are our emotional responses at a time like this? How are you feeling? So then next week, I will be talking about mindfulness, bringing you a few more techniques and going a bit deeper into exactly what it is and how it can help us in our day-to-day lives. The 3rd week, the 4th of June, Jade will be talking about navigating relationships in a time of crisis. Then the 4th week, Marelise will be speaking about trauma and grieving the loss of normal, which I think we can all relate to. And then the final week will be an open question and answer session. So to sum up, to maybe answer any questions that weren't answered, and just to hone in on anything that might be troubling you. So it'll be the same format each week, every Thursday, 11:30, Facebook Live, and you can find the link on my page. And we'll try our best to publish the link because sometimes it's hard to find these links to go to directly. So welcome. I will be bringing on Jade Brown. Welcome, Jade.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm well, thank you. A little bit nervous, actually.
Yes.
Our first time on this platform, and yeah,
great.
We'll see how it goes.
It's a first. It's a first, and we'll learn from this experience. So, Jade, I think the first question, if you can just answer, is why is self-care so important at this time?
Okay. Tanya, my understanding of what self-care is something we do deliberately to take care of ourselves, to look after ourselves, whether it's emotionally, mentally, physically, and relationally. And that word deliberate is very important because we have to be deliberate about caring for ourselves, looking after ourselves. And so just in terms of with the lockdown situation, I think all of our routines have changed and there's so much change. we need to find new ways of self-care. We need to also just become a bit aware of how are we going to look after ourselves in these different ways during this time of crisis.
Yes, I can hear you, and I can relate. Now, is one person's way exactly the way as another person might practice self-care? How can we find things that maybe are pertinent for ourselves?
Well, some people like to exercise. I myself find that difficult. My sister-in-law goes for runs and I can't go for runs. Maybe a slow walk for me, or breathing, or nature. We all have different ways, and we almost have to become aware of ourselves and know what we need in order to find better ways of caring for ourselves.
Yes, I agree. And I've heard a very relevant description that it's not selfish. It's actually something that we need to take the time for in order that we can help others. So if you could imagine yourself in an airplane and there's oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help somebody else. So it's certainly not a selfish thing to be practicing self-care. It's required. You need to be able to do it so that you can have the impetus or the resources available to help the people that you love and care for.
Definitely. If you are on a plane and that happens, and you want to help other people, you can't help anybody if you are depleted of oxygen, if you can't breathe. So it makes sense to first put your own mask on, breathe, be okay, and then help the others that you can, basically.
Lovely. So can you talk to us a little bit more then about what your topic is? And if there are any questions coming up, I'll put them onto the screen. So you're talking about navigating relationships in a time of crisis.
Definitely. So what I said about self-care being deliberately looking after all these different areas of your life, relationship is an area that needs a lot of care as well. If you're in a marriage, whether you're a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, with this lockdown situation, we've all been kind of put together and living in one space. Relationships could be taking strain, or they could be flourishing during this time. So looking at relationships, I think, will be really important in how we can facilitate closer connections, how we can just navigate relationships during this time and make it intentional in how we facilitate self-care in this way, relationally as well. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what I wanted to ask you is how can I connect more, or you might have viewers out there that might be thinking this, how could I connect more with a loved one during this time of crisis?
Okay, thanks for that question. So something really practical that we can use is maybe the different love languages. There's a self-help book by Gary Chapman, 5 Love Languages. And if you know yourself a little bit better and in what language you speak, then it's easy to communicate that with your loved ones, to say, look, I appreciate quality time. Can we put some quality time on our schedule? I appreciate words of affirmation, or you speak more words of affirmation to your loved ones, and in that way facilitate closer connection. So I would suggest and it's so easy to figure out your love language if you don't know it. There's so many little quizzes online. And just if you know yourself a little bit better, it's easy to communicate your needs to your loved ones, and then you allow them to communicate those needs to you as well.
Yes. We've had a question, and I'm just going to put it up there because I think it's quite pertinent. From Shirley Bossman, self-care for families dealing with addiction. Is there advice for families? I'll do over to you, Jade, and I'll also comment. I think that's a tough one because at times like this, there must be a lot of people out there who are going through quite a few crises because maybe they've been cut off from avenues of obtaining whatever drugs or alcohol they used to take. Maybe they're spiraling out of control. Maybe there's an increase in violence in the families. So how can we comment on that self-care for families dealing with addiction?
Okay. So I'll just give a little bit now, and perhaps I can add that into my talk and just expand a little bit more when I do my talk. But at the moment, I can imagine just around making sure that you yourself are safe. And if there's children involved, make sure that children are safe. If there's an addict or somebody who's struggling with addiction in the home, if there's violence or frustration in that sense. But I would say that if each person takes care of themselves, the frustration doesn't escalate as quickly, in a sense. So, Miss Bossman, self-care in that sense, I would say make sure that you're okay, so that when there's a crisis in the home, you're able to think clearly, you're able to deal with the situation. There are still addiction facilities that are open at the moment, so that is also a possibility, maybe to seek help, maybe to set some boundaries around the addiction or around the family members where there is addiction. But yeah, I would say in this time, make sure that you yourself and children are safe first, and then see what else there is available.
Yes. I think I can comment here a little bit as well. There are, like you said, there are treatment addiction centers that are open. There's also a group called Tough Love. So if the family is dealing with an addict, this is an excellent group, Tough Love. You can find them on Facebook, and I will also post their numbers on my group later. They are really there for the family. So there are centers for the addicts, but a group like Tough Love is there for the family. So, they would actually be the best at helping the families cope, at explaining the patterns of codependency and how you can really be there for your loved one, giving that love, but also having boundaries, because boundaries of what is and isn't acceptable needs to be met. Otherwise, the family's life revolves completely around the addict. So I think I can just give that little bit, and I will obviously post that onto my page later. I think that also reminds me, I didn't mention at the beginning that this is not a therapy group that we're running now and over the course of 5 weeks. So if any issues come up that trigger you, issues that, that you need help, you need to seek help, I will be posting those numbers as well just now. There is a South African Depression and Anxiety group, which are excellent at being able to receive calls 24 hours. And then there is also another group in Port Elizabeth called Revive. They are an NGO dealing with counseling and trauma as well. And then obviously there are any local psychologists and registered counselors in your group. You can Google and a whole list of them will come up. So there are many resources, but just a reminder that we're really just having an open discussion, and we can't be there in terms of therapeutic role for the viewers. So we will point you in the right directions, and we will post those numbers as well. Let's just see, another interesting question has come up. I hope you answered your question, Shirley. And here's another question. The physical touch aspect of social distancing is causing a lot of stress with tactile people. How can they cope? Excellent question, Harry, because there are a lot of lonely people out there living on their own. Even if you are in families, maybe the families aren't relating well, and there's maybe stress going on. So how do we deal with this? Jade, any answers?
Yes. I think at home, if you do have people living with you at home, social distancing is really difficult. And obviously you take your precautions, but at home, if I think of husband and wife, you still sleep in the same bed, you still are close, and touch still comes in there. But if you're living on your own and your physical touch is your love language, then I would suggest to perhaps almost step a little bit out of your comfort zone and call people, use your words, a little bit more. Speak to people that you maybe are missing and communicate that a bit more. So this whole situation is causing us to stretch ourselves and really go out of our comfort zone. So if physical touch is your primary language, we are still able to speak other languages and connect with people in other ways.
Great.
I hope that answers the question, Harry.
Yes, I think so. I like that description of we're all having to stretch ourselves and think of novel ways of how to have our needs met. I saw somebody online the other day demonstrating what a self-hug is. So for those who may not know, a self-hug, let me just take this comment off so that I can demonstrate a little bit. Okay, so a self-hug, you can either do this, like really, and a firm pressure. They said actually firm pressure, touching all the way down your arms, and really, I know it's not the same as having a physical hug from someone that you love or that you're missing or that you really are wanting that physical hug from, but you can give yourself the tactile stimulation of actually being there for yourself in this time. So, and then of course, I think animals, if you've got any pets, I think they can also bring in a lot of that tactile, just nurturing that a lot of us are missing right now. Okay. Any more comments that you'd like to make, Jade?
For now, I think I'm okay. I'm looking forward to doing the talk and expanding a little bit more, but I will focus a little bit more on connection and facilitating connection, and then also a little bit around conflict. And then maybe one thing just to say is around maybe domestic violence, is that it's not okay. And I will also maybe put some resources out there. Thank you, Jamie. I went to school with Jamie, so it's really nice to see her posting a comment. So yes, I will put a bit more information together regarding violence in relationships as well. And just, you mentioned boundaries. It's not okay for there to be violence in the home. Sometimes we settle for, and because of the situation, we think we can't escape, but there is definitely help, and there are resources that we can use to get out of these situations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in my talk.
Great, great. So a reminder that Jade is going to be speaking more in depth on this topic in the 3rd week. And just for the date on that, that's the 4th of June. So Thursday, the 4th of June at 11:30, Jade will be really going in depth, and most of that discussion will center around what she has to share on navigating relationships in this time of crisis. Thank you, Jade.
Thank you so much, Tanya.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now going to be looking at our next co-host, who is Marelise Lerm, and she's going to be speaking to us about trauma and grieving the loss of normal. I think there must be so many of us who are tired of hearing the new normal and like, is there ever going to be a normal? But and that obviously brings up a lot of trauma. So Marelise is going to kick this subject off for us a little bit, and we'd love to hear those comments. Please give us some comments, because then we know that that this is reaching you, that maybe it's applicable, and that we can direct you to resources if you need any specific resources already. Thank you, and over to Marelise.
Hi, good morning, Tanya. Thank you for this opportunity. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you. Now, Marelise, how would you describe how do we grieve the loss of normal? What is that all about?
I listened to an interesting talk yesterday, and it was about Dave Kessler, who actually wrote with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she's obviously the lady who talked about death and grieving quite a bit, and he subjected the 5 stages of grief very similarly to what we are going through at the moment. So there's denial to start with. This is not going to affect me. There is anger. Why do I have to be locked down in the situation where I am now? Then you also go through sadness, where you are experiencing to say, I can't see my people. Is this ever going to end? Where is it going to end? And then it's a slow, gradual movement towards acceptance to say, okay, it is what it is. We are where we are. What have I got to help me get through the period where we are? And even though these 5 stages, I would like to tell people that there is no normal way to grieve what we are going through at the moment. Trauma, Gabor Mate, who is an expert in addiction, says that trauma is not what happens to you, it's how you experience it. And this is so particular to at the moment because each individual is handling this in their own different way. They've got different ways of dealing it. And sometimes it's also traumatic for people to come in and then see somebody else is doing great. I'm not doing great. What's wrong with me that I'm not doing great? And we are living in abnormal times. So there is no way to say this is a set of guidelines as to how you should be experiencing it. Experience it for what you are. And I think it ties back to self-care, because if you self-care and you look after yourself, you are going to know when you are emotionally starting to step into a danger zone. I want to liken the oxygen mask to a cup. If my cup starts getting empty, then I cannot keep on pouring into other people's cups the whole time, because I'm going to end up sitting with an empty cup. It's about finding out, how do I fill my cup to make sure that I am okay to be able to help people through this? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does, absolutely. Because yeah, we can't be there for others if we cannot actually have more control and more resources at our own disposal first. There's an interesting comment that's just come up. I'm glad that you mentioned Gabor Mate on addiction, because here is another comment that I think might be good to expand on a little bit. Diane Kremnitzer, please expand on the conflict issue between our addicts and specifically parents.
Thank you. That is an excellent question. And there is so many, because each person, once again, each person is dealing with their own set of issues going through. The way that we used to deal with things is gone now. And that is bringing the loss of normal in. Maybe before, where the addict could go out to go and buy what they need to use, there's a curfew in place now. And addicts and addiction, we're talking about smoking, we're talking about drinking, all of those things. You can't even be in the streets after 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the evening, and then you are going to be taken in by the police. So there is a constraint being placed on the addict. Now with the parent, where they maybe could escape it before by going to visit a friend, have a braai with a friend, or go to the normal support system, that system is gone because of the lockdown. So when there's already been conflict in the situation previously, this conflict is now amplified because of a lot of external restrictions that comes into place. Diane, if that answers your question, I hope it does. If it doesn't, please expand and ask as many more questions as you need to, and we'll see how we can sort of help you further.
Okay. Yes, we can definitely go into that more in depth in your topic in the fourth week, and that's on the 11th of June. But I was just thinking now that with parents, there's obviously a lot of conflicts that arise between them and the addicts, as you've already mentioned, Marelise. I'm just trying to think of some practical things. I know that the Tough Love group often speak about drawing up an agreement with the addicts in the house, so that things are clear and that they know when there are going to be consequences and what those consequences are going to be. Because if things are not spelled out or things are not clear, that's when there can be a lot of chaos in the family structure. And I did mention codependency earlier on. That is through no fault of the family. They often, that's just the pattern that they get used to dealing with the situation, and that becomes their new normal. So Tough Love and any other groups like that who help with families and people going through addictions, because let's face it, must be a very frightening thing for both sides, for the addict and for the family, to be going through that, and they do need help. So yes, I think agreements is the number one thing. Knowing what your bottom line is as the parents, because often parents tend to let things go, and then unfortunately, then things do spiral out of control. So the concept of putting on your own oxygen mask, as the parents, put on your own oxygen mask first. Think about the situation, what you're prepared to put up with and what you're not prepared to put up with. And then in a very structured way, in a calm way, in a loving way, spell it out with the loved one, with the person who's addicted, so that's understood and is clear. I don't know if that helps at all. I hope it does. But there are definitely resources out there who can help more with this as well. Okay. Have you got any more comments?
I just see that Brucey has asked the question here. Please go in depth on the discussion about trauma and the grief, the loss of normal, considering that some of our beloved people have lost their families through the pandemic, and the ritual way of dealing with loss has changed for some people. I think that is one of the significant traumas that people are experiencing at the moment. You are having a loved one who's going into a hospital and not being able to help that loved one. You can't even say goodbye to them. And how does one navigate that? How do you deal with it? And one of the ways is to maybe find a support structure within the family where you can actually speak to people about it. How do we deal with this? How do we actually cope with this now? Because not only are you dealing with losing someone, there's a physical death. That person is not there anymore. Maybe there was a lot of things going on even between that, a run up to not being able to say goodbye to that person. And then the question comes up, how do you deal with that? How do you take on? And I think it's to find the support. That's going to be the most important thing. People, you do not have to go through this alone. There are so many people out there willing to help you, like Tanya said previously, and Jade commented as well. Find somebody that you can talk to about this. And if I know culturally, there's a lot of things that is also at play at the moment, and maybe consult the elders and ask them, how do we deal with this? I've seen a lot of pastors from our churches as well. They're battling because they can't console their people, and it is very difficult for them at this stage. So reach out, look for a support group if you can. I hope that helps.
Okay. Yes, thanks, Marelise. It's very, very sad, and it's a very traumatic thing for a family to have to go through when you're restricted in terms of the numbers of people at funerals, and maybe different ways of having funerals. I've seen that funerals have been done over like a live stream almost. But it's to find those different ways. It's to find those different ways to respect those customs and traditions. It might just be in a different way, a way that maybe hasn't been thought up yet. But to find that way, because you do need to have access to be able to grieve and to be able to reach out to community or family members that are important.
Yeah.
So find those ways, and I'm sure it's still possible, but it is difficult, very difficult to be grieving.
In my talk, I'll also be covering different myths regarding the grieving process, where some people are saying you have to be strong. And for me, that's such a big myth, because if you tend to try and be strong in the moment, you might have to deal with what you need to deal with, the practicalities, but you also need to allow for yourself to experience the emotions. And I think we're moving into a time where there's so many different social norms that's being rewritten, like big men can't cry. Evans, if you need to cry, you need to cry. You need to express those emotions. And part of that is to be able to identify your emotions. Know that you are grieving and it's okay to grieve. And being able to express it, whether it be to a friend or writing it down or making a phone call or crying into a pillow or screaming into a pillow. Expressing that grief is going to be an important part as well.
Okay. Great. There's another comment here that I think is an interesting one as well, and I've seen it actually elsewhere. So it's not, you're not alone, Nadine, in this question. I've seen other people comment on this. Is it strange to feel like my personal mental health has improved in isolation? So would you like to comment on that? That's a nice one. What would you like to say?
I actually did quite a bit of research on that question. So Nadine, thank you so much for asking that, because that's such a trend that I saw initially and going forward a bit as well. And then the big debate came up about introverts and extroverts, and why do introverts handle it maybe better than extroverts. There was a meme that came up that says extrovert or introverts check up on your extroverts friends. They're not handling the whole situation. And I'm not sure if that's where you fall in, but it's almost like some people have been waiting for something like this to happen, or they've been anticipating it for a lot longer than others. I don't know if this is your situation, so I'm not going to speak specifically about your situation. I'm going to speak more about what I've read up on. And sometimes when there's people who has been more open to contemplating life and death and asking those type of questions, they're not so fearful of a possibility of a pandemic coming or something happening to themselves. So it could also be that maybe you needed to have a good rest away from the daily normal struggles and everything that you went through. And this actually provided it for you. So you managed to get the coping skills and say, I can breathe without having to rush around, without having to go to a shop every 5 minutes for this. So it could be why you are actually coping better. Thank you for asking that question. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely one. Well answered. Thank you so much, Marelise. There's another one I just want to bring in here, because I think this is a common focus for parents who, even for single parents, so I don't know, Gertie, you might have a partner, but particularly for single parents, how do they cope so the question is, how do I keep my sanity in lockdown? I have to work and have 2 little boys. Very pertinent question.
Very, very so much. And I think it's something that you will also be touching on in your topic when it comes up. It's the trauma of, and I'm going to mention trauma because it is a traumatic experience. The roles are changing consistently the whole time for people now. Previously, you maybe was a mother and somebody who worked. Now you are a mother, somebody who works, you are at home, maybe doing both at home as well. Or maybe you have to work outside. So there's also the additional stress coming on top of that of feeling this pandemic. So there's additional strain coming in as well. So I think it comes back to self-care. And the word that pops up is actually tying into Tanya's topic with mindfulness. Try mindfulness techniques, identifying what is going to provide self-care for you, what is going to fill your cup at the end of the day. I know it's difficult when you're sitting there and you are trying to have 2 minutes to yourself to just fill your cup, and you've got a child on each leg, the dogs are barking, they want food, the boss is on the telephone. But maybe try and find that moment and tune into Tanya's talk as well.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Marelise. There's another interesting one that I'm going to bring in here. Something I was interested in, can this kind of passive trauma happening at the moment, people not directly affected at this point, can this form of trauma bring up past active trauma that was experienced? Have you seen that it can cause a person to relive it now during this time? Thanks to Anne. That's an interesting question. See what Marelise has to say about that. I can also comment if need be.
Okay. Would you like to go?
Yeah, then you can just add on. I've also seen that is something that's been happening, particularly people who are vulnerable. It's bringing up past traumas that maybe we felt, are long gone. We've dealt with them, but because of the nature of this time that we're living in now, with so much fear, so much uncertainty, it's like those past ways of dealing with the trauma is brought to the front. Our brains are designed to help us with dealing with events. So the situation that we're in right now, we don't know when it's going to end. Yes, we hear the phases are releasing us, but yes, we also hear that there's going to be some impending doom and a lot of people being affected, and we read the stats every day. It's traumatic. Our brains don't know how to cope with that kind of uncertainty, not knowing, are we going to be affected? Are our loved ones going to be affected? How are we going to cope? How are we going to cope with financial trauma? How are we going to cope with looking after our loved ones? So the brain looks for previous ways of having dealt with these situations, so typical situations, and of course then it will go to the previous trauma and bring up how you dealt with it or how you coped with it at that point. Yeah. So I don't know if Marelise, if you'd like to comment further on that. It is normal to be feeling like that right now.
I think it's very pertinent what you said. The previous ways of dealing with trauma is not there. It's been like it's taken away from us in a way. You are limited in where you can go and what you can do and who you can be with. So the normal coping structure is actually completely gone. And now those things are surfacing again. The federal healthcare line in America had 1,000% increase in their phone calls when comparing the period of April 2019 to April 2020. So it's very real that people are experiencing a lot of difficulty with emotions, especially if there's past. Trauma is not something that you build a resistance against unless you have built up the necessary skills over the years. So if there is already something that is traumatic for you, and once again, I want to reiterate, if any of the things that we are saying or we are talking about triggers you in any way, please find someone to talk to. Please connect with any of the numbers that we're going to put up on the pages and work there. But just so you know, it is okay. It is very normal for those past experiences to sort of be triggered and come up again. Okay. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Another question. I found I coped better than expected and found simple things like establishing a routine and plan, no matter how simple, and a basic review at the end of the day. Simple tasks that we would laugh at under normal circumstances have actually triggered. I don't know if it means an unusual interest. Maybe say more on this. Thank you for mentioning that, Harry. Yes, that is the number one go-to in terms of self-care that everybody's been saying. Build in structure every day for yourself, particularly those people who are battling with anxiety, because it's the uncertainty and worry and anticipatory anxiety that they might be feeling. So building in a structure for yourself will provide the container of safety and protection and enable your families also to feel like things are a little bit more under control in this new normal that we're all going through. And then to be prepared to adjust that structure, because we're all moving into different phases in the next while. So it might need revision, it might need tweaking. But definitely build that structure, especially the people working from home. I'm sure you know or have heard this by now. Get dressed like you would normally for work. It makes you feel like you are in work mode. Makes you feel a little bit more productive. Put in a plan for yourself. Simple and little breaks. Schedule breaks during the day. Marelise, anything else that you'd like to comment on there in terms of structure and simple activities that could be done to relieve senses of trauma and anxiety?
I think the one good thing that we are experiencing at the moment is that we can actually go for a walk. You can step out, and the tactile people, I just want to come back to that as well. Go hug a tree if you need to. Okay, I've done it. People might give you a little bit of a strange look, but just that moment of connecting and also saying hi to people. Go for that walk, which is going to be stress relief. It is greeting people. I think that's amazing at the moment to see so many people out in the street. So you can have that little bit of contact. So in that, if you don't normally go for a walk, break that little bit of a routine and just go for half an hour or 15-minute walk in the morning. Okay, thank you.
But before we finish with Marelise, this is a lovely comment here from Melissa. Thanks, she says, a comment. A lot of people are experiencing a great deal of pressure to self-care in very specific ways. On social media, there are so many articles and posts which are very prescriptive. Or it's almost overwhelming. Makes people feel more stressed when they realize they're not doing what they should be doing. Thank you for that. I think Marelise touched a little bit on that when she said, you know, you compare yourself to other people, and some people seem to be doing amazingly. And yes, I agree with you, Melissa. A lot of people are putting out very prescriptive self-care lists. Find your way of enjoying taking care of yourself. If it feels like a should, you're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to actually add anything to your reserves and to your resources. You're not going to feel any enjoyment. You're not going to feel any joy out of doing it. So find exercise that you enjoy. That could be jumping on your mini trampoline. It could be dancing wildly in your living room. It could be swimming if you still want to jump into cold water. It could be taking a lovely shower and feeling that shower, the warm water, going over you like a hug. We spoke about giving yourself a hug earlier. That could be your way of self-care, a lovely cup of tea. Marelise, any ideas on what could be seen as not prescriptive self-care practices?
I had to smile when that question came up, because right at the beginning of lockdown, this meme started going around. If by now you haven't learned a new skill or learned to play the piano or bake a bread, it's not that you didn't have the time, it was just an excuse. You lacked the willpower. And I smiled at that because we forget that everybody is not experiencing this in the same way. This is a global pandemic. This is global trauma, and people are feeling it. So if you just manage to stay in your pajamas and watch Netflix for 2 days and have a bit of soup and maybe just wash your face, it's fine. If you don't manage to wash your face, it's also okay. It is starting to get in touch with yourself again to find out what is good for you. Not what society is prescribing to say, this is what you should be doing. Find out what is good for you, what fills your cup, what makes you happy. If you've got a blank canvas in front of you, there's nothing written on that canvas. How will you fill that canvas in? Will it be, I don't know, I don't even want to say, give suggestions. It is for you to find that internally and say, this is what makes me happy. We forget that these people, we want to talk about the comorbidities such as diabetes and COPD and all of those things, but we forget that these people have also been struggling with pre-diagnosed before COVID with depression, with anxiety, with all sorts of other issues and concerns, and they might find that they're battling a bit more right now. And if you haven't learned to play the piano by now, a sense of guilt comes in. And with all respect to anybody and all, I would like to say, I give you permission this morning to take the guilt and put it in a suitcase and put the suitcase in a hole in the garden and put a tree over that, because there's no shame in just surviving and breathing. If that's what you're doing, just breathe. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Marelise, I was just wondering if it's not pertinent also just to bring in right now people who might not be coping very well, who might have gone past those feelings of overwhelm and might be heading for depression. You've just brought that in now.
Yeah.
And might be having feelings of suicide. And there's a lot of people back out there who are not coping with changes that are not of their making, and now they don't have jobs, or there's financial pressures, family pressures. What can you say about feelings of suicidality? What can we do?
Thank you for talking about the elephant in the room, because often people will say, oh, if you're thinking about suicide, you're selfish, or you're just thinking about yourself. There is an article that was written, and I think it's in the JAMA Psychiatry Journal, where the authors named it, and they said COVID-19 and suicide, the perfect storm. Right now, we are sitting where we have all these traumatic experiences, loss of job, potential loss of job, change in home environment, change in your social structure, change and uncertainty of economic viability. Already there might have been people who's been battling financially or battling in the relationships or any of those things. So I've often heard over the last couple of weeks I just want to step out now. I'm tired with this. I can't do this anymore. And right now, it is okay. When you get to that point and you feel like that, there are going to be people at SADC or any of your people, local people that you can contact. We have made available, so many people are available on teleconference, or just send a WhatsApp. I know with Revive, you can just send a WhatsApp and talk to them. Find a support group. It's difficult if you are in that situation to sort of just put your hand through the curtain. Just hold on for one more day. If you can't hold on for one more day, one more step. Send a message, make contact. I don't know if you want to add anything else on there, Tanya.
Also to reach out to your normal sources of support, like medical doctors. If you're on medication, now is not a good time to be going off your medication. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Do what needs to be done. And look out for those signs of depression. A lot of men, for example, might not think they're depressed, and they may show signs of severe irritability. Those are some of the. Can we just talk about some of those symptoms, Marelise? So how would people know I'm heading for a major episode of depression? Because we all have down days, and we all have had times where we don't want to get out of bed for the day. But I think if I can just comment, this is where we're talking about a prolonged pattern of at least 2 weeks of severe symptoms. So let's talk about some of those feelings. You mentioned hopelessness, Marelise. Can you just talk about some of those symptoms?
I think also it also varies from person to person, but it's also important to notice that it will go over an extended period of time. So I mentioned earlier on, have a bath, maybe make sure you have a bath daily, or maybe at least every second day. That's one of the things to look out for. The person don't want to do self-care anymore. And I mean like actual physical self-care. Sleeping, excessive sleeping, not wanting to sleep as well. Complete loss of interest in normal stuff that you would normally find interest in. Some people mentioned that they would love reading books, and now they battle to read through a book in a month. That is also normal for what we are experiencing right now. More signs of depression is the anger, irritability, shortness of temper, and withdrawal is also a big thing. You just want to stay in your own room. You do not want to connect with anybody. That's why I said, if you feel you're there, it's difficult to sort of put your hand through the curtain of depression, but try. Okay, I don't know. Any other things you want to add on there?
No, I think you've mentioned it perfectly. I think so. We did put those numbers for SADC and Revive up. We will post it to the page as well. Please, if this has triggered anything, or you're feeling like you need to reach out for help, please, that is the first sign of taking self-care, asking for help, getting support that you need. Okay.
We're going on, and we're starting to run short of time here. So I want to ask you about your mindfulness that you are going to be doing. Tell us a little bit about how mindfulness can help us we've talked a lot about self-care this morning. So how can we bring mindfulness keys into a little bit of self-care?
Okay. Thanks so much, Marelise. Thank you. I'm going to just go full stream with my picture, if that is okay. Perfect. Thanks, Marelise. And if there's any more questions, please put them up. If we don't get to it today, we will certainly deal with it next week, because we've now only got 15 minutes left. Okay, so a little bit more about mindfulness. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm not a mindfulness teacher. There are people who teach mindfulness over 8-week programs. I have done a lot of those programs myself. I did a 1-year program at one point, aiming to become a mindfulness teacher, but then I started back at university. So that was several years ago. I've done my research in mindfulness as well. And it's something that I really feel is valuable. If you've listened to a lot of these psychology talks, self-care talks online, a lot of them will bring in mindfulness. And I found it amazing. I'm really grateful that mindfulness is now getting such a widespread name out there as something that can be useful. So for people who haven't heard what mindfulness is, it sounds a little bit odd, mindfulness. So what I like to say is it's different from mindlessness, which most of us are doing most of the time, unfortunately. We've spoken about depression already and anxiety today, and just general worries and overwhelm. So when all of that's going on, our minds are scattered, our emotions are all over the show. We're either in the future planning what to do, what hasn't been done, our to-do lists, our plans for the day, our goals, and our worries for the future, anxiety. So that's very future orientated. Our minds are there, not in the present moment with what is going on around me right now. And we'll talk a little bit more about that just now. Or it may be in the past, our minds dwelling on previous memories, people that we've loved, events that have been traumatic, things that have gone on in the past, so which can give rise to rumination and depression. So therefore, our minds are not here in the present moment. We are used to going on autopilot. We're used to, we do that because our brains make sense of our lives. So they try to remove things that are going to take up our attention. For example, like driving a car. When you're driving from A to B, I bet none of you can say, I saw this person, I saw this happen, I saw that car. We just tune it out. And that is how we live our lives most of the time, in a mindless kind of distraction between past and future, and have very rare moments where we're actually fully present, right here, right now. And what I mean by being present. So John Kabat-Zinn, who is a medical practitioner who brought mindfulness to the West, and he set up a stress clinic in Massachusetts. He likes to give this definition of mindfulness, which is it's a specific way of paying attention in the present moment, on purpose, in a non-judgmental fashion. Now that sounds like quite a mouthful. But most of us have experienced this at some point in our lives. If you can think of maybe a beautiful sunset that you've witnessed, or an amazing event like a birth of a child, or an event where it's filled up your senses with, you know exactly how you were feeling. Every detail is crisp and you've kind of been fully present. We've all had times like that. And so it is possible. But now we're wanting to encourage you to do this more mindfully, on purpose, so that you can learn to have more creativity at your disposal, and that you can find a better way of responding in the present moment than being reactive. Because when we are being reactive, we will be impulsive. We will say things that we don't mean. We will feel certain things, and we will become fixated in our habitual responses to things. So let me just go into that a little bit more. So I've spoken about the present moment. I've spoken about non-judgmentally means remove the self-critic. So that comment from Melissa earlier about feeling, so much pressure that we should be doing this and unhappiness. Most of us have got a self-critic that judges our experience. So either judge our behavior against other people's behavior, or what we believe we should be doing, and I shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have done this, and basically commenting on your thoughts even. So when we pay attention mindfully in the present moment, we will become aware of those things, because maybe it's running in the background and we're not even aware of how critical we can be of ourselves. So by paying attention in the current moment, it's listening for those thoughts. It's paying attention with our senses, our 5 senses, coming back to what is happening in terms of what are we seeing, what are we hearing, what are we touching, tactile, what are we smelling, what are we tasting. By bringing us back to our senses, it really grounds you in the present moment. Then in terms of your body, what's going on in your body? Because you may have a very sore knee, for example, that you've been ignoring for a very long time, which is actually problematic and requires your attention. So be becoming aware of what's going on in your body. You may become aware of those first flutterings of anxiety, or fear or anger. So before you erupt, before you react in a way that you may not want to react, to become aware of what's going on internally, paying attention in the present moment. So just now I'm going to be going through a short little practice with you, because it's the easiest way of tuning in to the present moment, and that is through our breath. So we breathe, all of us breathe, each and every second of the day, but we don't know. It's on autopilot. It happens without us knowing. We don't have to say to ourselves, okay, now breathe. But it is a way that we can intentionally bring ourselves back into the present moment, into our bodies, and to be aware of what is going on so that we can produce or give ourselves more self-care and know what is right for us in that current moment. When we breathe, a lot of us breathe very shallowly. We're breathing and it's just coming to here, the top part of our sternum, or top part of our chest. And that's how people can kind of hyperventilate, especially when they're having panic attacks. So learning to breathe is vital because it calms our body down. It calms that stress reaction, which is that flight reaction. Flight, fright, and freeze, which is the common stress reaction. And by then breathing deliberately, intentionally, we calm our bodies down. We help our vagus nerve to actually calm us down so that we can now respond in a different way. So I'm going to give you an example of how to breathe. So, breathe in through your nose deeply. So when you breathe in through your nose all the way down. Feel it almost like you're sucking it down through your neck, right through into your abdomen, right into your stomach. And imagine there's a balloon there, and you're going to fill that balloon with air. And when you breathe out, you're going to breathe out through your mouth and actually push the air out. Imagine that balloon going flat. I'm going to do 3 breaths with you, talking you through it. So if you're sitting there now, sit comfortably, relax your shoulders, put your feet flat on the floor, uncross your arms, uncross your legs, and give your body the chance to relax right now in this current moment. So breathing in through your nose, all the way down into your abdomen. Fill your abdomen with air. And out through your mouth. Breathing in through your nose. All the way into your abdomen. Fill that balloon with air. And out through your mouth. And another deep breath in through your nose. And out. That's just an example of, and that's only 3 breaths. Ideally, you could do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And if you're finding it hard, thoughts may arise, because that's what our minds do. Thoughts arise, feelings arise. We may become aware of itches and aches in our body and pains. Allow that to happen. Don't become fixated with it. Allow it to pass like a cloud in the sky. It arises and it passes. And continue coming back to your breath and breathing in and out. That is one of the simplest tools of starting to become more mindful. There are different practices. See Melissa say, I'm so relaxed. That's lovely. So that's just a very brief example, and we're going to be closing up shortly in about 5 minutes. There is a lot more to mindfulness, and I'll be doing a whole session on that next week. So we will be talking more about it, going through different practices. If you're somebody who battles to sit still, and maybe there are people who are battling with anxiety, and I've heard that's quite a difficulty to try and breathe, even to breathe mindfully. So do different things. There's activities such as mindful walking, mindful activities. Anything that you do during the day can be turned into a mindful activity. It's about tuning in to yourself, into the current moment, on purpose, non-judgmentally, and in the present moment. So things like making a cup of tea. Most of us don't even think about it. We slack the cup down, look for the water, look for the sugar, or whatever it is, and we don't think about it. So slow that activity down. Bring your full attention to it. What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I touching and feeling? By bringing all your senses into that current moment, it's like your whole system stops going into that flight, fright, freeze, because you're now becoming more available. And by relaxing, it's allowing your brain to then think of solutions to a problem that you might have been experiencing. It allows you to be more creative. But if we get into those reactive patterns and we're continually in the past and the future, we're not actually present. We cannot be creative or solve issues or dilemmas. I'm just saying, there's another comment here before we close up today. How can I help a loved one that is having a hard time? Is there anything I can do? I think I'm going to bring Jade on to see what more comments she can add to that, because I think that's very much in terms of relationships. Let's just bring Jade on before we finish up today. Jade, anything you can do to suggest a loved one that's having a hard time?
Okay. First thing that comes to mind, Tanya, is the question, what do you need? It's a simple question. And when you ask it with intention and availability, I think it helps the other person to be honest and say, I just need a hug. I just need 10 minutes of time to talk. I need, financially, I'm struggling. And then if you're able to help, you help them. If not, there's so many resources at the moment that you can tap into. I'm a part of a group called Charities in the Bay here in Port Elizabeth. And wherever there is a need, people are rushing to try and help others. Where there's a lack of food, where there's people struggling emotionally, there is always somebody that's willing to assist. If it's a loved one, ask what they need. See yourself what you're able to assist with, and then also seek external help where necessary. So we can only be available and offer the resources that we can. Again, with the cup, we try and pour from a full or a half full cup at least. So I would say try the best you can, assist with what you can. Other than that, try and seek external assistance as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks so much, Bussy. Thanks for everybody who's provided questions here. I hope we've got to most of them. If we haven't, we will be providing more resources during the coming weeks, and we will put information on our pages. A reminder, please, if anything has triggered desperate feelings that you may be having, or actually triggered you that maybe now's the time to actually get some help, please feel free to reach out to South African Depression and Anxiety Group, SADAG, which is a non-governmental organization. They're available 24 hours a day. And of course, Revive here in Port Elizabeth. They also have active therapy groups there. And of course, I'm sure we can also provide any other, some of the psychiatric clinics that are available. We will put together some resources in Port Elizabeth that are available. Thank you very much for everybody who's tuned in. As this is our first broadcast, I'm not sure if it switches off automatically or not. I suppose we switch off ourselves. Okay, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your comments. We've certainly enjoyed it. I hope you have. And please tune in next week at the same time, same place, where I'll be mainly handling mindfulness and different coping techniques, so that we can really get to grips with how this can help us in self-care. And of course, the other two lovely ladies will also be available for any questions that you might need to bring in terms of self-care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya, for facilitating. And thanks. It was lovely to see all the comments. I feel like we've ticked another box going on this platform. It was really scary, but actually it's just another part of embracing our new normal. So thank you for facilitating.
Pleasure. Great. Look forward to seeing you viewers all next week. And remember, it's going on for 5 weeks. The last one on the 18th of June, every Thursday at 11:30. Thank you so much. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye.